All right, so the comply argument. I have a major problem with that argument because I would love for you to ask Tamir Rice's mother if he had complied, if he would be alive.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I've stumbled across this video from The Bridge, where Black conservative women and Black liberal women sit down to debate some of the most heated topics in our community right now. We're talking police safety, the comply argument that gets thrown around constantly, and whether people actually understand what over-policing means when they defend it. This conversation gets real, and there's a moment where one side brings up a case that completely dismantles the just comply narrative, and I need you to see how the other side responds to it. So make sure you watch until the end, and please comment down below where you're watching from. I really love to see people from all over the world connecting in here. All right, now, let's get into the video.
I feel safe around the police. Yeah, so I'm a journalist. I go out all the time on the streets of New York, DC. I've been here in California many times to film, and consistently, the police do not help me when I am being attacked, when people come up to me and start shoving me, pushing me. Just on September 1st, there was a Labor Day anti-Trump march event, and I had my mic stolen from me and my hands very aggressively and really hurt. They were grabbed by this young man, and it caused my mic to fly out of my hand, and I lost my mic, and I also ended up with a big scratch. The cop saw everything. He saw what the guy did, and the mic went rolling somewhere, and the cop looked at me and said, well, there's nothing that I can do. And I'm like, but you just saw this happen to me. And I don't think that there is an overall issue where like the police focus on one race more than another for racial reasons or racist reasons. I think there are just good cops and there are bad cops, but overall my experience with cops have not been super positive. I mean, when I've been pulled over a couple times for a taillight out or I was going too fast, you know, I did what he said. I pulled out my license and everything was fine. It wasn't like, you know, he held a gun to me just because I'm Black, but overall I've had very negative experiences with the police. So that's why I put down.
Interestingly, in regards to your specific experiences, what I think is happening is that the police have been so vilified by the left, telling people that the police are violent, are aggressive, that they now don't even feel comfortable interjecting in many things. Like, it's actually safer for them to keep a distance than do their job. Because if they come in and they get involved in what's going on, and now you've got 8 million people with cameras saying, you know, they clip that one 10-second clip where the police shoved someone off of you and threw them to the ground. Now the police are brutal. Now we've got, you know, George Floyd type protests happening. And I feel like what's happening to you or what happened to you in those instances, it's like, it is an actual result of us screaming for 3 years, defund the police, we hate the police are horrible. Even back, you know, with like, F the police, like we've been anti-police for so long in this country. Yeah, like we've now made them the enemy and they don't feel as, you know, comfortable
So
doing their job.
can I ask, where do you feel, I mean, where does that fundamentally come from? Yeah. The F the police comes from what experience?
So I think one common misconception amongst people that look at the conservatives is they think that we just think racism doesn't exist and it doesn't happen. That's not true. Of course, terrible things have happened and we've needed to respond appropriately to those things. And there is a rational fear that there's generational trauma that exists. I'm not discounting that. But I do think that there is as we go on with the police, I think what we've done as a collective is make it so we think all police are one way. When we look at things statistically, Black people are not getting gunned down by the police on every corner. That's just not what's really happening. And when so much of our focus is on the amount of white cops that are killing Black people, and it's not focused on the amount of Black people that are killing Black people, that's an issue to me.
So what do y'all think of police gangs?
Police gangs?
Yeah, like there's gangs within the police. What do you think of those?
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Like inside the police, they have their own gangs where they do things that are outside of the law.
Right.
Yeah. We totally condemn that.
There's good and bad in everything.
Yeah.
I'm more so curious about the over-policing in Black neighborhoods? Like, how do you conceptualize that?
Well, when
Why
there's
are they over-policed?
Why? So
Because
I honestly,
they
when we
commit
look
most
at the
of the
numbers and the
crimes.
amount of crime that does
Who
happen
is
in
they?
Black,
Who is they?
People in the
Black
Black
people
communities.
commit most of the crimes you're talking about nationally?
yes, absolutely.
Or
on a
they
per-
just
on
get
a per-
framed for them.
on a
Very
per-
a chicken or the egg type
It's
of thing.
very
All
much
right,
so,
so-
yeah.
So can you repeat your question? I got lost in it. I apologize.
Yeah, just what I'm wondering is, you're saying like, okay, you made your point.
So right away, we get hit with conservatives saying they feel safe around police. And I need you to understand something crucial here. When someone says they feel safe around police, that is a privilege statement. That is not a universal experience. And what happens next proves exactly why this divide exists. Carmen shares her story about being attacked at a march. Her microphone literally ripped from her hands, and the cop who saw everything told her there's nothing he could do. And listen to how the conservative side tries to spin this. Savannah jumps in saying the police have been so vilified by the left that they don't even feel comfortable interjecting anymore. Hold on, so you're telling me that police reform advocacy has made cops too scared to do their jobs? That's the argument? Because what I'm hearing is an admission that police are selectively choosing when to protect people based on optics. That's not about being vilified, that's about accountability making them uncomfortable. And here's what drives me absolutely wild about this framing. The left didn't vilify police for no reason. We started demanding accountability after watching video after video of excessive force, of people dying in custody, of communities being over-policed while simultaneously underprotected. That's not vilification, that's documentation. When you have footage, when you have body cam evidence, when you have witness testimony, that's called evidence. And if police feel uncomfortable because people are watching them do their jobs, maybe the issue isn't the watching. Then Paris brings up something that completely shifts the conversation. She asks about over-policing in Black neighborhoods. And this is where you see the defensive walls go up immediately. Because over-policing isn't just about having more cops present. It's about what that presence means. It means stop and frisk. It means broken windows policing. It means Black kids getting arrested for things white kids get warnings for. And we're about to hear Paris break down exactly how this plays out in practice.
How do you understand then over-policing in Black neighborhoods? Because
So
Black
how do you
people
define over-policing?
having a large police presence. Well, yeah, I didn't really have an answer because I've spent no time with the police. I've never really had an interaction with them because of the fact that I grew up in places where the police were not.
So what makes you think that there's over-policing?
Because of what I've learned.
So I've worked at the University of Alabama as a community director working with the police, and that's why I said green, because I've worked very closely with them. The systems in place where like the white spaces are taught or teach students, like the white students, how to not get caught doing bad things. So the things that are happening in Black communities in those neighborhoods are happening in upper echelons too. They're just not getting caught because they're not.
The police
being
are not there. That's why I
overpoliced.
brought up my experience was like the police. There is a larger police presence in predominantly Black areas.
So are the
So how do
police-
you understand? Why are they there?
I would say that if you look at the amount of crime that Black people are committing in this country, like if you go into the Black neighborhood, you are getting fed through bulletproof glass. So it shows you that there's a problem within the neighborhood because the people that are serving you are scared of you. The people that live within the neighborhood are scared of you. And to deny that is actually happening and that would require more of a police presence is just a disservice to the Black community. Now, I do think that there are good cops and there are bad cops. I'm not here to say like all cops are bad, all cops are good and everything is perfect, but I do think that like specifically Black men, they don't have conflict resolution skills. They don't know how to deal with conflict when it comes to the police. A lot of the things you see online is like you could have just complied and you would have never went to jail. None of this would have happened.
Can I offer just a different perspective? Because let's entertain that maybe, yes, I'm just entertaining that there's more crime that happens in Black communities. Instead of over-policing, do you not think that there would be more of a benefit to offer programs for rehabilitation and offer growth for those communities?
But why should
Hold on, let me
events
finish my
offer
sentence,
that?
please. Let me finish my sentence. Instead of just over-policing, which is going to create more fear and more of the narrative that you all are talking about, which how the police are viewed. And that's what defund the police is actually about. It's about taking money away from over-policing and being able to offer programs for the community to grow in a positive way.
All right, so the comply argument. I have a major problem with that argument because I would love for you to ask Tamir Rice's mother if he had complied, if he would be alive. The 12-year-old that was gunned down after playing on a playground for 2 seconds. So there are far too many. I mean, I think that we have gotten to the point where these names have become a hashtag and we don't understand. Like, okay, so if it happens to not happen very often, to say that child's life wasn't worth at least a deep dive into this conversation is infuriating to me. To say that it's just, he was a 12-year-old. So I absolutely, now raising a 14-year-old child who is on the spectrum in my predominantly white beach community, and we can't walk the boardwalk without being suspected for something. I absolutely do not. This is my experience. Why is because we're dipped in chocolate.
To go back to the original prompt of do we feel safe around the police? I feel 100% fine around the police because I don't commit crimes, right? And that's just, the reality is I am not going to lump myself in with a community that feels that they need to fear the police. I actually know many police officers. I've dated police officers. There are police officers in my church. Their children are friends with my child. They are people. Just like you, just like me, they are people. And you spoke to the police gangs, but I would ask you about the fraternities, right? We can't say that all fraternities in colleges are terrible because some fraternity boys commit horrible crimes and rapes and things of that nature. We have to accept that there are individuals
Organized crime
that do the
and
wrong
hazing
thing.
is different.
Well, there's organized crime in the Black community. There's way more organized crime within the Black community than there is within the police department.
That's not true at all. You
That's
need to
absolutely
read,
true.
honey.
So
This is the moment that exposes everything. Paris worked at the University of Alabama as a community director with police, so she's not speaking theoretically. She's speaking from direct experience. And what does she say? That white students are literally taught how to not get caught doing bad things. The same illegal activities happening in predominantly Black areas are happening in white spaces, but one gets policed and one doesn't. That's not a crime problem. That's a selective enforcement problem. You cannot tell me that's not systemic when you have someone who worked inside the system confirming it. The drugs, the parties, the violations, they're happening everywhere. But police presence determines who gets arrested and who gets to go home. And when conservatives try to justify this by saying, well, there's more crime in Black neighborhoods, they're ignoring the causation. You police an area heavily, you're going to find more crime. That's just math. Meanwhile, white college. Students are getting insider tips on how to avoid consequences entirely. Then we get to the comply argument, and Briana says if you just complied, you would never go to jail, none of this would have happened. And Melinda comes back with something that should end this argument forever. She brings up Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old child playing on a playground with a toy gun. Police showed up and shot him within 2 seconds. 2 seconds. So tell me, how exactly was Tamir Rice supposed to comply when he had 2 seconds before being killed? What was his mother supposed to tell him that would have saved his life? That's the question Melinda asks, and nobody on that stage has an answer. Because here's what the comply argument really is. It's victim blaming. It's a way to put the responsibility on the person being policed instead of the person with the badge and the gun. And when you bring up cases like Tamir Rice, like Philando Castile, who was complying and still got shot, like Briana Taylor, who was asleep, the comply argument falls apart completely. It was never about compliance. It was about control. Then Naisha says she feels 100% fine around police because she doesn't commit crimes. And that statement right there shows the fundamental disconnect. Because feeling safe shouldn't depend on whether you think you're doing everything right. It should be a baseline. But for too many people, it's not.
Reparations are just and necessary.
Okay, good.
just and necessary. Okay, I actually am glad you repeated that because I thought you said they were just unnecessary.
Yeah, so I'm going to say, like I said, that I believe that people who are enslaved shouldn't get reparations from people who were never slave owners. And it's just like, how would that even work? And then what about the Black people that own slaves? Like, it's just so much to go into it. Instead of looking for a handout, which is what typically liberals and Democrats do, why don't we just work hard to, in the country that is one of the greatest countries in the world and people come here to die, why don't we just work our butts off to have more?
So, reparations is not, we're not talking about just Black folks, because Japanese received reparations after World War II. So there are times where reparations are just. It just seems that in our country, when it applies to Black folks, we're the only ones that aren't going to get it. That's historically the case.
I think that that's an interesting thing to point out, that historically people have gotten reparations. Slavery was messy, and as was mentioned, there were white slave owners. There were Black people who owned slaves as well. There were white indentured servants from Ireland and Italy. There were people who came to this country as free Blacks from the very beginning. How would you do it? And this is a direct question that I would love for one of you to answer. How would we repair through reparations in a way that is fair and just?
And if I can just add, and also, what do you do with biracial people? With people of lineage of both sides? Okay.
First and foremost, we're not getting anything. I just want to make sure that we're clear. We're not.
But that's probably true.
For example, for my parents who grew up in the South in Jim Crow, I feel like reparations for that generation is something that is very trackable and very doable because they were redlined, they were kept from owning homes, they were kept from being able to build generational wealth. And I think that is a good starting point for people 75 and older that are in the Black community, that you could easily give them what they were kept from back in the 50s and the 60s before the civil rights happened. So that's what my solution would be. Trying to track it back to slavery, yes, it should have happened because slave owners did get reparations, but the Black community that were enslaved did not. So if we're going to look at some way to try to give repair, I think starting with the people that suffered through the Jim Crow would probably be the best and most easiest and just way to do that.
Can I just say I think that's fair?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
The reparations debate starts, and immediately you get the usual pushback. Briana says people who weren't slaves shouldn't get reparations from people who were never slave owners. And I need to address this because it's one of the most repeated talking points against reparations, and it completely misunderstands what reparations are actually for. Reparations aren't about punishing people alive today for something their ancestors did. They're about addressing the continuing economic impact of slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, and systemic discrimination. When your great-grandfather was legally barred from buying a home in certain neighborhoods, when your grandmother couldn't get a business loan because of her race, when your parents were denied access to quality education and job opportunities, that has a compounding effect on your family's wealth today. That's not ancient history. That's living memory for many Black families. And this is where Paris makes an argument that's so specific and reasonable that even a conservative on the panel agrees with it. She's not talking about tracing lineage back to slavery, which would be incredibly complex. She's talking about people who lived through Jim Crow, her parents' generation, people who are 75 and older, who were directly redlined, who were directly denied home ownership, who were directly kept from building generational wealth. That's trackable. That's documented. We have the maps showing which neighborhoods were redlined. We have the loan applications that were denied. We have the receipts. And when Paris lays this out, Savannah, who's been arguing against reparations this whole time, says, I think that's fair, thank you. That's not a small moment. That's a conservative acknowledging that when you make the case specific and factual, it becomes undeniable. Because what happened to that generation wasn't just morally wrong, it was economically devastating in ways that are still playing out today. Think about this. If your grandparents couldn't buy a house in the 1950s, when homes cost $15,000, and that house is now worth $400,000. That's generational wealth your family never had access to. That's college tuition for your kids. That's business startup capital. That's financial security. And it wasn't because your grandparents didn't work hard enough or weren't qualified. It was because the government explicitly denied them access through policy. That's not a handout to fix. That's a debt to repay. So when people say we don't owe anyone anything, I push back hard. Because if you benefit from systems that were built on exclusion, and those systems gave your family advantages that other families were legally barred from accessing, then yes, there is a debt. And addressing that debt isn't divisive, it's corrective. It's saying we're going to acknowledge what happened and try to make it right, instead of pretending everyone started from the same place. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.